Okay, everybody, get ready for some fun. We got Jeff back with us.
We're even early, Connie.
Connie earlier. Yeah, Psycho. Yeah, we're going to talk that.
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
Hey, everybody, welcome to Late Late Horror Show. I am Dino as always. With me, as always, is Dave Plouffe. He says, glad he does not reside at 17 Shore Road. We will find out what that's all about. And returning for the second time is Dr. Jeff Thompson. Good to have you here with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I'm happy to be here with you again.
Good. Yeah, we're going to be talking Robert Bloch, Psycho, maybe a little bit of Kolchak, maybe some Dark Shadows. Who knows where we'll end up in the show. So let me say hi to everybody in the chat. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button, share, do all that good stuff. Hello, Connie. Hello, Nathan. Hello, Black Roses. Raj, what's going on? Good to see you. John Swan, how are you doing? Tune. Kathy, Connie Cleary, member for 52 months at level 3 support. Thank you very much. As always, thank you for what you do, Dave and Dino. Yes, there you go. Okay, so let's get to it, Dave. Google users here. How you doing?
Oh, that's nice.
Nobody specific, just it's Google user. Lizzie is there. How you? Everybody's rolling in now. So Sin City Jim, how you doing? Dave, I'm going to send it to you. Kick it off. Any way you want. We are going to have fun here, and we are going to talk like we always do, all of our favorite topics. So
this is our second time with Jeff Thompson. I'm going to give you a little bio. First of all, he is a college professor. He has taught 35 years at Tennessee State University, and most importantly, written 3 books on Dan Curtis, 2 of which I believe were up for Rondo Awards. And we have the television horrors of Dan Curtis, The Night of Dan Curtis. Look at that. And The House of Dan Curtis as well. Little known, he is the unsung star of Murder in Music City as well.
Well, how did you know about that? Did I tell you about that?
No, I know. I do my research, Jeff.
Yes. Yeah, in the late 70s and early 80s, I acted as a paid extra in several movies that were made here in Nashville. And since then, more and more movies have been made here. You, of course, remember the 6-year-long show Nashville. And there's going to be another one starting in the fall, Nashville 911. Oh. But I acted in a made-for-TV movie, Murder in Music City. Later, it was renamed The Country Music Murders, starring Sonny Bono and Lee Purcell. And character actors like Claude Akins, whom we know from The Night Stalker and other Dan Curtis productions, and Morgan Fairchild. I got to spend a long time that day talking with Morgan Fairchild. I knew all of her credits up to that point: Search for Tomorrow, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Dallas, and even her Avengers-like TV pilot with Granville Van Dusen called Escapade. And she said, wow, you really know your stuff.
Yeah.
Also, Belinda J. Montgomery, whom I asked about her movie, The Devil's Daughter, directed by Jeannot Swark of Somewhere in Time, and co-starring Jonathan Frid. And she said Jonathan Frid was a very nice man. And I was an extra in a TV episode, a TV series, a short-lived series called Boone, which was created by Earl Hamner of the Waltons and the Twilight Zone. And our scene was taking place outside and inside the Ryman Auditorium, the longtime home of the Grand Ole Opry. And I looked back, way in the back of the Ryman Auditorium in the pews back there, and sitting alone was a man. And I thought to myself, well, that looks like Earl Hamner himself. So I went back and talked with him for a little while about the Waltons and the Twilight Zone and Falcon Crest, because his son was working on that show at the moment. and he was very nice. He was, you know his voice by hearing him on the Waltons every week, and he was just like that in person. But the two movies where you can actually see me well as a paid extra in the background are um, Living Proof, the Hank Williams Jr. story, a TV movie starring Richard Thomas, and Sweet Dreams, the Patsy Cline movie starring Jessica Lange and Ed Harris. And it was funny because years later, one Saturday night, WGN ran a double feature of, quote, my movies,
Nice.
Sweet Dreams and Living Proof, because you can see me in both. But
Wow.
yeah, so that was a lot of fun. At that time, I was working part-time at different places, WAMB Radio, Griffin Supply Company. So I didn't have a set schedule, and I was able to devote, 12 or 13 hours at a stretch to these extra jobs. They might start at noon and run until midnight or 1 a.m. because a lot of extra work is just standing around and waiting. But what I found interesting, in addition to meeting all of those wonderful stars, was talking to the other extras, because this being Nashville, every single one of them was a singer, songwriter, musician, actor, dancer. So it was interesting meeting all of them as well as the stars of the movies.
When did these movies come out? Like, how long ago was this?
Oh, Murder in Music City came out in early 1979.
Okay.
And Living Proof, the Hank Williams Jr. story, I believe came out in 82, and the Boone TV show in 83, and Sweet Dreams, I think, in 85. But, they shot it here in Nashville a year ahead. So it was 1984, I believe, when I did that.
Okay, nice. Yeah, just to get a reference of the time frame, but very cool, very cool.
And you had mentioned Richard Thomas. That was Richard Thomas, John Boy from the Waltons.
Yes,
John Boy.
yes. He was very nice.
Dino had just, I believe, has just gotten into the Waltons.
Oh, good.
And
Yeah.
I live near Walton Mountain, which is just outside of Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, it was a wonderful show. It was my favorite TV show until the TV show Family came on, and that became my favorite show. But yeah, the Waltons is just exquisite, especially those early seasons when the whole cast is there. Later, some of the cast members departed, but those early seasons are just perfect.
Oh yeah. I fell in love with. I don't know what made me watch it, but one day I was just in the mood I'm like, let me give this a shot, because I'm into a lot of the old 70s, TV shows and stuff like that now. And I started watching it, and I'm just like, there's something very nice and alluring to the episodes, that the family all sticking together, and in the time period too, they did that very well.
Mhm.
But I love the Waltons. People make fun of me for loving it. I'm like, I love it. It's great.
There's a whole series of books as well on the Waltons that are outside the series. If you ever get tired of the TV show, so. And you had mentioned Morgan Fairchild, who is absolutely so beautiful. Not as beautiful as Jane Seymour, but almost as beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was a kid, so this has been in the 1970s, I remember watching a very early Morgan Fairchild production where she was, and I don't know, I've never been able to find the movie credits for this, but she was in kind of like a rental home, a hostel, and people would walk around and they would have their middle fingers up, and their term was marvelous. And if you said like marvelous, that means you were like part of the cult. It was a very odd movie that I caught early on, and it had that very British feeling as well. And having gone through her credits, I've never been able to find it or anything like that.
It's not on IMDb.
No,
I haven't heard of that. It's not her movie, The Seduction, from 1982. So I don't know. Maybe it was something she did for cable or something like that. I don't know.
I just remember we had taped it. We had just gotten a VCR and we had it taped very late at night. And I just remember it was one of the things I had on tape to watch, and never been able to find any record of it. And now, of course, the VCR tapes are all gone, and just kind of fun to remember that.
Well, if Morgan is watching, I'm sure she will know the answer and can tell us.
If Morgan's watching, I'll put my phone number right up here.
Please call.
Right.
Away.
But I did put up 17 Shore Road because earlier today, I actually watched Burnt Offerings. I had not seen Burnt Offerings, and I have to say, I absolutely loved it.
It's one of Dan Curtis's best productions because he had more time to spend on it because it was a theatrical film and more money, and it's a very faithful adaptation of Robert Marasco's novel, except up to the very end. But a lot of the actual dialogue from the novel makes its way into the Burnt Offering script, which was co-written by William F. Nolan and Dan Curtis. Curtis said that Bill Nolan took the first half of the book and Curtis, took the last half and adapted it. But when it came time for the ending, the book ends in a kind of, nebulous artistic way that books can end, because you're reading the words, but it's not a very visual or visceral or exciting ending. So Dan Curtis took care of that and gave it a sensational, uproarious ending. Robert Cobert's music is wonderful. I was involved in associate producing the soundtrack CD and writing the liner notes. And it's just a great movie. Karen Black said that when people came up to her, they wanted to talk more about Trilogy of Terror and Burnt Offerings than any of her other movies, Nashville or The Day of the Locust or Great Gatsby or anything. Because those are the things we remember, when we were watching TV as kids and teenagers. Those ABC movies of the week and everything we saw on TV just seared into our minds, and we looked forward to the summer rerun if that ever came around, and then syndicated reruns. So, but yeah, Burnt Offerings was released in the theaters in October of 1976 and was the #1 movie in America for 1 week, and it won the Saturn Award for Best Horror Movie, beating The Omen that year. And it won an award at a film festival in Spain and somewhere else. But it is a great film that later ran on NBC on a Saturday night. And Dan Curtis remarked that he watched it when it was on NBC and called Robert Cobert to discuss some of the music, that they had done well, and one quibble about where the music should have lasted longer than it did. So yeah, Burnt Offerings is just fantastic. And read the novel sometime by Robert Marasco, because it is terrific too, and very similar. It's a very faithful adaptation up until the more bombastic ending.
Oh, it's a great ending. Great ending. First
I
of all,
I almost, it's sacrilegious, but I almost like Burnt Offerings better than The Omen. You know me, I've always said The Omen is overrated. And listen, very, very, very good movie.
All right.
Jeff, jump back there. I saw you jump back, but I love The Omen. But people put it up there as kind of the greatest horror film of all time, and I'm just not up there. It's not. But Burnt Offerings, I'd put it a little bit above Omen even. So
well, they both are great movies, and we fans get in the bad habit of comparing and saying, "Oh, this is better than that, and this is the best." But we don't need to do that. We can enjoy every single movie and TV show individually, because each is different and each has its good qualities and strengths and weaknesses. So, yeah, Burnt Offerings is the kind of movie that really sticks with you. There's certain moments like, hearing the coffin dragged up the steps and then the door opens, and a few other moments that are just horrifying. So it is a really good movie that sticks with you.
Dan Curtis in his coffins. Go ahead, Dave.
I want to say, first of all, thank you, Sin City Jim. I've got that written down. I want to say also hello to Tony Horror Writer, and I believe Sweet Indigo also joined us. So welcome, welcome. I was
Where to go, Dave?
All right. Well, there's just so much. I was a little embarrassed because this was my first time watching Burnt Offerings, and I was watching it, and I'm like, wow, that lady looks a lot like Betty Davis.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and it happened to be Betty Davis. You know, and I just it just cracked me up a little bit. I love
Betty Davis has always looked like Betty Davis. Dave.
She has. But I wanted to talk about Coburn for just a moment. I love the fact, or Cobert rather, I love the fact that Dan Curtis uses generally the same people throughout his career. And it just seems that I think it melds, especially with the music. You know, it's a Dan Curtis production sometimes by listening to the music.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. I have written about that in my books. Dan Curtis did have a repertory company of sorts. He certainly did on Dark Shadows. But when he started making TV movies and films, and of course his great World War II miniseries, he would use the same people over and over again. Harris Yulin, I can't think of Robert Walden, Jack Palance, you know, people who have made 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 movies, and Dark Shadows star John Carlin made 14 productions with Curtis, counting Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. So Curtis freely admitted that he hired people whom he liked. And that is important. You know, in a workplace, you want to like the people you are around. And so these people like Polly Bergen and Roy Thinnis and Mills Watson and many others did a good job for him time after time. And so he continued to go back and use them over and over. So yeah, it does. You can be in another room of the house, and when you hear the music, you know, oh well, this must be a Dan Curtis movie because I hear that Robert Cobert music. And once you start watching it, you probably will see people whom you have seen in other Dan Curtis productions, as well as great character actors from old Hollywood and early television. You know, Curtis hired people whom he had liked in productions, like he put Herb Hatfield in the Norliss Tapes, and John Carradine, Margaret Hamilton, Al Lewis in The Night Strangler, and Clint Walker in Scream of the Wolf, and Scott Brady, a film noir and Western actor, was in 6 of Curtis's productions. And then Joe Dante started hiring him because Dante, like Curtis, uses a same group over and over again.
Yeah, me and Dave talk about that a lot. Sorry to interrupt you, but you know, in the late 70s, mid 70s there, a lot of these shows and programs like Kolchak and even the made for TV movies used a lot of those old actors from the early days. And you get a good rotation of the same actors in a lot of the series and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that. Me and Dave talk about that quite a bit. So.
Oh yes, and one of the focal points of that was the ABC Movie of the Week.
Yep.
Because those featured all of the stars of old Hollywood. You know, Ray Milland, Lou Ayres, Gail Thundergaard, as well as all of the new and up and coming actors and actresses who were just starting out and making their names on those TV movies. And then later on The Love Boat, you saw all of the older stars along with the new current stars. So
we saw them all on Love Boat, right?
I think we even saw Darren McGavin on Love Boat.
Right. Yes. So, oh yeah, that's why I love um, uh, the ABC Movie of the Week, and then all of those shows, Mannix, Mission Impossible, Barnaby Jones, Cannon, Kojak, Policewoman, because you never know the name of the game. You never know who is going to pop up and who is going to direct the episode. Somebody like Jack Arnold might be directing. So it's fascinating. And I'm glad so many of these movies and TV shows are on DVD and apparently streaming also.
Yeah.
Well, that's too one of the I don't know if it's a myth or a legend with the Norliss tapes, because I don't believe it ever came out on VHS.
No, it never came out on VHS. It was not on any media until 2006 when it finally came out on DVD. It had run on the Fox movie channel a few times, but it was largely mythic because we remembered seeing it and seeing those scary scenes. The Norliss tapes is truly a scary movie, but we may not have seen it for 10, 20, 30 years or more until now. Luckily, we can watch our DVD. And in the next issue of Wonder magazine, number 19, I am interviewed about the Norliss tapes. Wonder magazine number 18 did a long interview with me, nominated for a Rondo Award, about Dan Curtis, Dark Shadows, and quite a few of his productions. But then Wonder magazine said, well, we didn't really say anything about the Norliss tapes, so let's do another shorter interview all about that. So I think that the readers will enjoy that when it comes out in a couple of months or so. But yeah, the Norliss tapes was really something, and it was a pilot. It was very Kolchakian in terms of its format of a writer investigating the supernatural. But of course, Darren McGavin and Roy Thinnis approached the part in two totally different ways. Thinnis was very downbeat. Those early scenes where we saw him in his house and essentially suffering from PTSD are as disturbing and scary as all of the outlandish fright scenes later, when the monster comes to life and when they open the coffin and when a fire starts, and Angie Dickinson's scene with her dog and her rifle, and that scene where they are in the car and they intentionally hit the monster with the car several times to try to get away from him. So I wish that it could have continued. And William F. Nolan said that he wrote a second script called The Return, which was totally different from the Norliss tapes because it involved time travel. It involved David Norliss going back in time to meet his young self. So Curtis and Nolan wanted to continue, but apparently no network was interested, and a writer's strike hit at that exact time. And so that sort of curtailed any activity with the Norliss tapes. But I wish that it could have been a series, or like The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler, 2 or 3 movies.
Yeah, I've never been able to find a copy of The Return by William F. Nolan. I have been able to find a copy of The Night Killers, the third Kolchak film.
Right.
But
yes.
Gosh, I would have loved to have seen The Return, or maybe even the TV series if it had been picked up.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes. It would have been perhaps similar to Kolchak the Night Stalker, but without any humor. Perhaps one reason why the fans didn't take to it as well is it's because it is very humorless and serious and downbeat, but that's what I like. But maybe other viewers wanted a little bit of the serio-comic tone of Kolchak, the Night Stalker. But I was going to say something else, but it went out of my mind. But yeah, it would have been great if the Norliss tapes. Dan Curtis usually had very good judgment, but there was one mistake he made because ABC asked him and Richard Matheson to work on Kolchak the Night Stalker, but Curtis turned it down. He said, I don't see how it can be done. I don't see how it can be done week after week. You know, he was thinking of trying to think up a new monster or supernatural menace week after week. But now, after years and years of episodes of The X-Files, Supernatural, and Grimm, I guess we know that it can be done week after week. But neither Curtis nor Matheson was interested in trying to draw it out into a series.
It's a shame they didn't try harder, because I think looking back on Kolchak, the series, I think they did a great job, and I think they came up with great premises. Listen, some of them were very lazy. Some of the characters and episodes didn't work as well, but overall, I mean, they did a good job.
When you see the first half of that series, though, it's fantastic. You know, where you have Jack the Ripper, where you have the zombie, where you have the vampire, the fourth episode, which is a takeoff from the original Night Stalker film.
Right.
One of Scorzene's victims comes back and comes back to Los Angeles. But it's, you know, I think after that halfway point where they're all, this isn't going to continue, I think things did get lazy from that point on, you know.
Well, according to Mark DeWidziak, who is an expert on all things Kolchak, Darren McGavin was becoming disenchanted with the show and wanted it to end. And he did not want it to be a Monster of the Week show. He wanted it to be more about investigative journalism. And he even wanted some non-supernatural episodes thrown in, where I guess he was, Kolchak was on the trail of embezzlers or, you know, the syndicate or the mob or something. I don't know how that would have gone over with the viewers, though, because we were accustomed to seeing a supernatural element in every episode. And if one had none, it would be kind of like the early days of Boris Karloff's Thriller, when many of those episodes were just straight crime dramas, and some were supernatural. But then as the series went on, it became more and more overtly horrific and supernatural. So who knows? Until just this month, MeTV has shown Kolchak the Night Stalker every Saturday night, but now has taken it off in favor of The Adventures of Superman. It's a shame that there are only 20 episodes, not counting the 2 movies, because, you know, when you do rerun them over and over, even just one a week, the episodes come around quite often. You know, I guess every 20 weeks you see the Trevi connection with Laura Parker, one of my favorites, or Horror in the Heights, Jimmy Sangster, who wrote the aforementioned Murder in Music City. In the 70s, he was here in the U.S. writing for several TV shows. He wrote some good early episodes of Wonder Woman, and wrote Kolchak the Night Stalker and the TV movie The Country Music Murders, and wrote young Daniel Boone, which was the short-lived replacement for Gunsmoke. When Gunsmoke was canceled in 1975, that Monday night time slot was given to a show about young Daniel Boone, but it didn't make it for very long. So and the Spanish Moss Murders, wasn't that the one that David Chase wrote?
That sounds right. Yeah.
So quite a few of those episodes were quite good. And of course, I love the Trevi connection because of Laura Parker's wonderful acting job, playing a totally different kind of witch. And those final scenes are quite atmospheric and scary there too. And I liked the one, The Youth Killer, with Kathy Lee Crosby, because
I like that too.
A year earlier, all of us had seen her as Wonder Woman. And I liked that pilot fairly well until, of course, Linda Carter, who is Wonder Woman, began playing the definitive Wonder Woman for us for the next several years. I enjoyed The Night Stalker. At that time, I was in high school in the marching band, and so on many Friday nights, I had to miss it and Planet of the Apes because I was at the football game. But I was able to catch up, on reruns or years later when the Sci-Fi Channel and other uh, channels showed these episodes. And now, of course, I have all of them on DVD and have watched them several times.
Yeah, Planet of the Apes series, another great series. I love that,
Hmm.
and I think I recorded that off the Sci-Fi Channel back in the day on
Right. In the
VH1.
mid 90s, it was
Yeah.
on, and then later it came out on DVD. And then, like both Kolchak and Planet of the Apes put two episodes together to make a 2-hour movie that ran on some syndicated stations. Oh, and then Kolchak the Night Stalker ran on the CBS late movie quite often. That's where I saw Mr. Ring and some of those episodes when they were on late at
Dave's
night.
favorite. Dave loves The Ring.
Oh, that is my worst Kolchak episode. We did a top 5, bottom 5, and that ended up on the bottom for me. I just did not like robomatic, instamatic nerve ganglia.
Listen, even the worst Kolchak, I have love for. I mean, they're all.
I agree.
Yeah, but I
But
get
I'd
it.
still rather see the Greek goddess of
Well, of course, Kathy Lee. Yeah,
Mhm.
I get
Kathy
that.
Well, you may have remembered this from my book or other, or Mark Dawidziak's book, The Night Stalker Companion. A new edition is coming out in a year or so. But when Curtis and Matheson were trying to figure out what they would do as the plot of the second movie, Matheson wanted to do Jack the Ripper at that time, but Matheson was very good friends with the great Robert Bloch, author of Psycho, who Bloch was fascinated with Jack the Ripper and Ripper type characters. He wrote the great short story, Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper, and other stories which featured Ripper like characters. And even his Star Trek episode, Wolf in the Fold, is about a Ripper like spirit that possesses people. That plot was reused later in 2 episodes of Medium. So Matheson called up Bloch and asked him, how what do you think of this? I want to write about Jack the Ripper. And Matheson said, I could tell from my friend's tone of voice that he really didn't like that. And so Matheson scrapped that idea and went with the idea of the surgeon who must replenish his youth every so many years. But that shows the extent of their friendship, because Matheson was not obligated to respect Bloch's feelings or be hands off on Jack the Ripper. Anyone can write about Jack the Ripper, but they were good friends, going back to even before Matheson met Bloch. When Matheson was about 23 years old, Robert Bloch wrote a magazine article praising this new talented writer, Richard Matheson. And so then they became friends. But I, of course, love Robert Bloch and have read many of his novels and short stories. And I'm happy to say that I was friends with Mr. Bloch for the last 4 years of his life, 1990 to 1994, for exactly 4 years, from July of 90 to July of 94, just a couple of months before he died. We wrote letters to each other. He sent me about 23 letters and about 19 postcards.
Wow.
And all of them were handwritten with a felt tip pen, either blue, black, or red. And some of them, the postcards were short when he was busy, but then the letters were a page or sometimes 2 pages of his handwriting. And he didn't have much to say about Psycho, but in our letters, we did discuss all of his other works and his future projects. At the time, he was putting together a collection called Psychopaths, But we also talked about our travels, our families. I sent him pictures, and he was always complimentary and of my family, my niece and nephew, who were young at that time. And I sent him some of my writing, and I could tell he had read it because he made germane comments to me, and we talked about his hernia operation that he had to do at one point, and his wife and daughter, and and his autobiography that came out around that time, Once Around the Block, which is a wonderful book. And then when I would read or reread one of his novels or short stories, I would comment in my letters how what I liked about it, how much I liked it. This was one of my favorites, and even I quoted a few passages that I thought were very effective. To me, Robert Bloch. Well, Poe is Poe, but H.P. Lovecraft is the Poe of the early 20th century, and then Robert Bloch, as well as Richard Matheson, is the Edgar Allan Poe of the mid 20th century. But
I think you got a book in the making there, right? The Letters of. Huh?
but to me, Robert Bloch is also the Ernest Hemingway of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, because Bloch's writing style is very minimalist, very straightforward. He doesn't go in for a lot of wild adjectives. He just lays the story out in very plain language for us, which is the way Hemingway did. And I told Robert Bloch, that his writing always has the ring of truth, even if he's writing about something weird and wild and fantastical, like the Goddess of Wisdom, The Pen, That Hellbound Train, so many great short stories. He made it believable. He convinced me through his writing, because his writing was so honest and straightforward. So he really sold all of those amazing concepts through his succinct, clear writing.
I absolutely love that you wrote and had a correspondence with him, because
And again, Dave, I'm sorry, but yeah, I think there's a book there. I mean, unless the what's in the letters isn't book worthy, but it sounds like if he's okay, maybe.
Yes, yeah. We talked about family issues and things like that might not be of interest to everybody.
Right, but I think
But
talking about the series,
yes, we
inside,
talked all about his short stories and novels, and he didn't say much about Psycho. He said that, well, he of course saw the movie. He saw it at a screening with Hitchcock, but he never saw the subsequent movies and didn't really care to, because he said my two other Psycho novels tell my story completely. My ideas. But the only thing he said, he of course acknowledged what a great film Psycho is, except he said the one thing he would change is the long talking scene with Simon Oakland of Kolchak, the Night Stalker. At the end, he's the psychiatrist who explains, or perhaps over explains, the Norman's problems, which, now we have seen DID, dissociative identity disorder, in so many movies, TV shows, soap operas. So we know all about that. But I imagine in 1960, of course, things like that had been written and seen, but not to the extent that we know it now. So and that the explanation at the end of the novel is fairly long. So I don't mind it. But you're right; it does sort of make the movie come to a screeching halt there while Oakland explains it. But we all of us had longer attention spans back then, and we could focus and follow scenes like that. The talking scene with Marion and Norman in the office is twice as long as that, but it's riveting.
Oh,
Nothing at
intriguing.
all
Yeah.
happens. There are no action scenes or anything, but it's just the dialogue, and by then we're interested in the characters, especially in Marion, and we're fascinated to learn more about Norman. And so that by today's movie standards, very long talking scene is interesting to us because we're learning more about these people.
Yep. And Dave, you were looking up at your ceiling. Is it about the
Well,
cave
I
in?
was
What's
looking,
going
well,
on?
not up my ceiling, but I have bookshelves over here as well. And I'm
Oh,
looking
okay.
at my Lovecraft and Robert Bloch books because I want to ask some questions.
Gotcha.
But about the letters that you and him wrote, it just reminded me of the letters that he and Lovecraft wrote together.
Exactly.
And he, unfortunately never met Lovecraft. Lovecraft died very early. But I just really do care about those correspondence. I think that's so important that, as a young man, Lovecraft read Bloch's writing and promoted him, and he became part of the Lovecraft circle, who is really one of my favorite writers. And when I took a class in college for my literature credit called the horror novel, and we read Dracula and Frankenstein, and we read Lovecraft. We also read Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu and all those. But it led me into Robert Bloch. And I love Robert Bloch. As you mentioned with the writing, it's very straightforward. It's not difficult. You can get through a Robert Bloch novel within a day. I mean, it's very quick. I love Psycho because Psycho is true. Literally, the script is the book. Mm-hmm. The only differences would be that Psycho, the book, there's the first chapter that is not in the movie. And then the character names are changed a little bit. The character of Norman Bates is middle-aged, thinning, heavy set. He's not the good-looking Anthony Perkins that ends up being cast, but I absolutely loved that movie. And you and I had written back and forth a little bit about Psycho 2.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm interested in your take on that film, because it's a wonderful film.
Oh, it's become a cult classic amongst the Psycho films. It's really, thought highly of.
I think it's one of the greatest sequels ever made, right up there with The Godfather Part 2, Gremlins 2, Scream 2.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
The Night Strangler.
I'm just saying.
So I of course saw Psycho 2 in the theater in 1983 and was just knocked out by it. And of course, I've listened to Jerry Goldsmith's fantastic music for the last 42 years on LP and CD. Goldsmith was a protege of Bernard Herrmann when they both were at CBS, so they knew each other. And so Goldsmith did not try to mimic Bernard Herrmann. That's impossible. But he wrote some of the music in the same intriguing sense of dread style that Herrmann used. But then Goldsmith also imbued his score with pathos and tragedy, because Norman too is a victim. So many people around him ended up being victims, but he too was a victim, and we learned more about that side of him in this film. And the fact that it was Anthony Perkins, the real Norman Bates, coming back 23 years later to make a continuation of his story. And, Jerry Goldsmith's presence gave it credibility. And we saw the Psycho house, the exterior, which still existed then and now.
A character of its own.
And the interior sets, everything was just right there. And so I just was very, very impressed with the movie, and love how it, the talk about another shocking, bombastic ending to a movie, how it brings the story full circle. You can watch the other movies, and you can watch Bates Motel and even Bud Cort's Bates Motel and all of that. But if you watch Psycho and Psycho 2, you get a one cohesive story with that brings it full circle. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. So yes, I love that movie. And the last time I saw it, I guess, was at Full Moon Cineplex here in Nashville, a dinner and movie emporium that shows great science fiction, fantasy, horror, cult, film noir, musical movies, and cult movies.
Nice.
So yeah, and then I recently rewatched Psycho as well because and have listened to Bernard Herrmann's fantastic music since I was a teenager. So yeah, I love movie music. I love Bernard Herrmann, Jerry Goldsmith, John Barry, and so many others. And and I credit Dark Shadows for that. You know, Robert Cobert's great music for Dark Shadows made me, as a kid, sit up and notice it. And so then I began listening carefully to TV and film music, you know, John Williams, Henry Mancini, everybody. And so I am a great devotee of film music. And that's one of the things I listen for and judge a movie by sometimes, you know.
Yeah, Dark Shadows. You listen to that music. Anybody who's seen Dark Shadows, I think some of the most iconic sounds when it comes to music. You listen to it and you go, "Wow!" You know. And Psycho, all strings, the entire soundtrack. So
Right.
very, very interesting there.
I showed Psycho, the original, to my classes, which is interesting because none of the students had ever seen it.
Mhm.
You know, and I have classes of 100 students, and they're all, we haven't seen Psycho. And one of my music majors was all like, yeah, the music works because they use this term dissonance. And I don't really know what that means, but it's because it grates on you and it makes
Yeah.
you feel uneasy and uncomfortable.
Right.
And it was
Like,
just
like the sounds in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
It's the same.
dissonance is a clash of tones. You know, it's not a beautiful harmonic sound, but it's a clashing sound.
Yeah. And but my students absolutely loved it, and we, you know, we talk about a lot of the things, like, you know, this is a first where you have a wonderful movie star who dies literally 45 minutes into the film, which leaves us going like, who do we connect with? You know, we end up connecting with Norman Bates, and I love the character of Arbogast, and it's just a phenomenal movie. There's so much foreshadowing, but I will say, in Psycho 2, the book, I love the book because Norman Bates comes back and the first thing he does is he kills Sam and Lila. And that just made me happy for some reason.
Yeah, Robert Bloch's Psycho 2 novel is totally different, you know.
Yes.
And another major character even dies in it. So so yeah, you cannot reconcile those two. Those are two totally different universes.
And Psycho, the shower scene too, her, like you said, dying halfway in the middle. It's like false redemption, you know. It's like, you know, she's attempting to wash off her crime, you know, only to meet her fate, you know.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's
And there's so many interesting shots of the actors caught in mirrors, you know. Hitchcock and his director of photography were highlighting how all of us have two sides to us, you know, the good side. And then when we do something bad or make a bad choice, we have a bad side too. And so we were always seeing Marion or Sam or the other characters as they pass beside mirrors, and even Lila scares herself when she turns around and sees herself in the mirror. So that adds, you know, another layer of, you know, another strong literary and cinematic theme of the doppelganger. And of course, I'm sure everybody listening has seen the movie, but if you haven't, a major character is doubled and certainly split and living a double life. So that ties in too.
Well, I love too how weather is a big part in Psycho, because the further that Marion gets away with her stealing the money, the weather gets more and more terrible until she can't drive anymore,
Mhm.
and she's at the Bates Motel. And when she realizes, I've screwed up. What the hell am I thinking? And she decides, yeah, I'm going to give the money back. Norman opens the window and says, look, the storm's over.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just thought that was so poignant. And even when we see Marion scantily clad, when she's stealing the money, it's black lingerie. And when
Right.
she's getting ready to go into the shower to cleanse herself, it is white lingerie.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
She didn't change midway. It's the idea that, we have this, it's changed to the good. So,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the story is a tragedy. It's Marion's tragedy because she had decided to go back and get herself out of a trap she had stepped into, but didn't get the chance. In something totally random, she dies, and of course Norman Bates is a tragic figure as well. So yeah, it's a fantastic movie and comes from Robert Bloch's terrific novel. And Alfred Hitchcock did say in several interviews that it all comes from Robert Bloch's book.
did you ever watch Night Gallery?
Oh, I love Night Gallery.
No.
We just covered the one with Leslie Nielsen where he was at the Psycho House,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and that
Yeah.
is just it was just terrific. I loved it.
I think it's part of what me and Dave do on Sundays here, where we go back to old shows like that, like Night Gallery and Kolchak and stuff, where especially Dave, notices a lot of these, these places that were shot in iconic places, that you would go, oh my God, that's that, So I think that's really, really cool.
Oh yeah, the Universal backlot. I've been on that tour, but you see that town square in every Universal movie, and notably in Back to the Future. But you've seen it in many other movies, and some of those street scenes. And of course, we saw that European street that slopes downhill in so many of the Universal monster movies. And then the Psycho House, you're right, has turned up on in an episode of the Hardy Boys, and I think in Murder, She Wrote, and in the miniseries Captains and the Kings.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you study, the MGM lot or the Fox lot, Batman or Universal, you will see those facades and settings over and over.
My favorite is the Munsters house,
Yeah,
because
right.
in the Munsters it looks an old decrepit house, but in the studio backlot it's a beautiful Victorian home, and you'll see it particularly in episodes of Columbo where they're walking through the city because it's a Universal production.
Right, and it was in an episode of Leave It to Beaver also.
Yep.
And then of course all of those houses on that street were used in Desperate Housewives for Wisteria Lane. But you're right, the Universal, the magic of movies and the great artisans there can dress it up or dress it down, make it look very scary, or make it look like just any other house, with a nice shape to it.
I liked it too because I think it's either next door or a couple doors down from the Hardy Boys house.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so I love that. I also had written down one of my favorite books, because it's so real, it's very scary, was by Robert Bloch. It was American Gothic. Have you read that?
I love that one. Yes, that's a very good one.
Of course, yeah, great.
And it's based on H.H. Holmes, and it's the World's Fair of 1893 in Chicago. And I think Devil in the White City by Eric Larson is also a story of that. So I just want to know if you had read it.
I've read that one. Yeah, I've read that one. I've read The Kidnapper, The Scarf, Laurie, quite a few of Bloch's novels. He writes great novels, and then of course he writes fantastic short stories, and I used one of his short stories with my students at Tennessee State University for a while, Till Death Do Us Part, a story about a man who wants to murder his wife and get away with it, and he thinks he has, but then something startling happens. So yeah, so um, I I really enjoyed my correspondence with Robert Bloch and getting to know him, because anybody in fandom or in the industry will tell you that he is one of the nicest, kindest, most caring people you would ever meet. He truly was a very nice person who took an interest in you, probably because, as you said, H.P. Lovecraft took an interest in him, and was very accessible to his fans. Anybody who would write a letter to him, business or pen pals or anything, would get a letter back within a week or two. He liked to say, I like to clear my desk every day. I don't want it to pile up. So if I get a letter, I like to answer it. And even, he was great to his fans. I remember a story of some guys who published a fanzine, and I loved those. I wrote for quite a few when I was younger. But some guys published a fanzine, and they wrote to Robert Bloch and asked him, "Hey, would you write an article for our fanzine?" And so he did. I don't know what it was about, but he obliged and just sent them a free essay that he wrote to put into their fanzine.
Oh, that's wonderful. I read Once Around the Block as well. I agree that it's a great book. If you haven't read it, it's so much about Bloch's history, but the sad part is, like, for me, being such a big Psycho fan, it's so little. There's just not enough about Psycho in the story, in the book. So,
and one last thing on Psycho. Yeah. I mean, the very ending, maybe one of the greatest endings to. It's up there to a horror movie. I mean, him just sitting there, you just get what the whole movie was about. Him sitting there. Yeah,
the great shot of pulling the car up, but then you have to really look fast and look closely to see as Norman, or actually Mother, smiles. We see a superimposition of a skull and the skull's teeth for just a split second.
Yeah, love it. So, Dave,
it is top of the hour.
Top of the hour, yeah.
And so this is where we just tell our listeners, viewers, what we're going to be doing in the next couple weeks. And
so get a few drinks of water there, Jeff, as we do the updates here real quick. So we do get 43 thumbs up. If you would, what the heck? My screen just went black, but I think we're good. Anyways, 43 thumbs up. Please give a thumbs up. Check out the descriptions below the video. It is, I do got a link to Jeff Thompson on Amazon. So check out the book maybe and give it a buy. So it's still up there. And Dave, go ahead. Tell us what we got coming up here in the next couple weeks.
July 13th, we are watching Columbo. It is the second pilot, Ransom for a Dead Man, with what is her name? Lee Grant. Will be starring in that. It's a wonderful 2-hour episode of Columbo. The week after, we're going to be covering Art Bell, where we have a Men in Black episode where we will scare everyone with that. The Wild Wild West on July 27th, and August 3rd, Scooby-Doo episodes 9 and 10 we're going to be covering.
Zoinks, the podcast.
Zoinks, the podcast is the title.
Those have been real fun. Scooby-Doo's been real fun.
Yeah, and we are going to do the Night Stalker, the original Kolchak, on August the 10th, because Dino and I have never talked about it, but Dino and Ted, the person
I covered it a long time ago, and me and Dave never covered it. We covered the entire series except for season 1, episode 1, which that's going to have to come up. We need to talk about it. But yeah, we're going to hit that one. So I can't wait to talk about that. I love everything Kolchak.
So that's what the next month is going to look like.
Okay.
Jane Seymour was on Art Bell once talking about Somewhere in Time and the idea of time travel in general.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, I remember that. Yes. I think I may even have that episode, Dave. So, yeah, I'm just trying to think of how to get it to you. That's all. I'd also like to thank one Sean Bond earlier, gave a $5 super chat. I appreciate that. And Tom F right now, $3 super chat. Little character there, a little super sticker they call him. Thank you very much, Tom F. Good to have you here. So yeah, I don't know if you want to move on to something else or
I do.
I
Because
figured you did, Dave.
there is a question I've been wanting to ask Jeff, because I had heard that he read the book Dracula, but he read it differently than most people do, and he read it on the specific dates that the book portrayed. Because it's if you've never read Dracula, it's basically diary entries and documents that you're reading, and it's not like chapter 1, 2, and 3. How long did it take you to do that?
Oh, it took most of the year of 2018. I believe Dracula begins in May and goes until November. But Dracula is an epistolary novel, meaning written in the form of letters, diary entries, newspaper clippings, and all of them have a date to them. At one point, Harker is there at Castle Dracula for about 2.5 weeks, and we don't know what happens, because there's a long gap until his next entry. But yes, I just spaced it out and read just that what little bit there was, dated May, June, July, so and so on that actual day. So that was enjoyable, and it lent authenticity to it, and I felt as if I was even more connected to the story because it was happening on that very day that I was reading it.
Yeah, what a novel idea, huh? How about instead of everybody making the same version of Dracula, and there's a new one coming out, just page by page, script by script of Dracula. How about Harker in that 2.5 weeks where he's just held up in that castle and what happens to him the minute he arrives and to the minute he ends? I think that would be a good concept.
Oh, yes. And, I've often said, well, of course, we still have not gotten a definitive, faithful filming of Dracula or Frankenstein, although Matheson and Curtis's Dracula with Jack Palance comes close. So does the Louis Jourdan and the Jess Franco, Christopher Lee. But I've often thought that if we could lift a scene here and there from almost every Dracula movie ever made and put them all together, we might approach the definitive Dracula, because almost every one of the Dracula movies does a scene very well, or the best of all of them, or includes a scene that is not in most of the others, or includes a character, Quincy Morris, who is not in many of the others. So, if we could just edit all of those snippets together, then we might come close to a definitive filming.
Quincy always bothered me as a character because I think he was from Texas.
Yes.
No offense to Texans, but it's just like it's a very European novel, and you have this Texan, and I just never understood it. But,
well, I think the novel is about the otherness, someone different, and I think maybe Stoker was tapping into some of his fears of that, the way we know H.P. Lovecraft was in his writing, because England at that time was a very insulated place. It was an island. Almost everyone was of the same race and many of the same religion. And so suddenly someone different, some other presence comes to the British Isles and creates mayhem. So I think maybe Quincy was just another manifestation of here's somebody who is not like us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good point. Yeah, because when I read it, I remember just so much with bloodlines. was so important in the text, and of course in England too.
Hmm.
We can talk about whatever you want, but since we're talking about vampires, I just want to throw out there Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins, one of the original, I do believe the original sympathetic vampire.
Oh yes,
You
there
know,
were hints of that in earlier productions, some of the Universal monster movies and things like that. But Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins on Dark Shadows really took it to the next level and made it a thing,
yeah.
to the point where now we have run across many reluctant, guilt-ridden vampires in
Mhm.
novels and films. But Jonathan Frid uh, took it upon himself to play it that way, because
Yeah.
um, the vampire character of Barnabas Collins was conceived as just essentially a monster of the week, only a monster of about 13 weeks. Um, when he came onto the show, he was definitely a villain, because of the horrible abusive things that he did to quite a few of the women and men of Collinsport, Maine.
Yeah.
But if the story had progressed the way Curtis and the writers had conceived it, um, Frid would have been on the show for maybe 3 months until another character, drove a stake through his heart, and that would be the end of it. And I don't know what the plan was next. Before Barnabas, the show had done a phoenix fire creature and ghosts. So I don't know, maybe, after the death of Barnabas, it would have been another ghost or maybe a werewolf or whatever.
Yeah.
But Curtis said that he conceived of the Barnabas character as, his word, a marauder, someone, heartless and animalistic, who came in and caused havoc. And that's the way the Barnabas of House of Dark Shadows was. There was still, his trademark um, tragic side and angst and reluctant vampire, but not nearly as much as the TV show. Because if you've seen House of Dark Shadows, you remember how that ends, and how Barnabas is essentially the villain throughout. But Jonathan Frid was, a great Shakespearean actor who wanted to really get into his roles, and so he said, I played the part like an alcoholic, like someone who had a secret and a compulsion that he hated and had to hide. And he also said, I played the part like a liar, because Jonathan said to me, the scariest monster is a liar, because once you start lying, you have to tell another lie to cover that up, and another lie to cover that up, and another lie, and keep them all straight, and keep telling lies until finally you become desperate and frantic and maybe even violent. And so he said that's the kind of monster that scares me. And so all of us viewers responded to that. I guess we might not have been able to analyze exactly why we liked him or why we were sympathizing with him, but we did. And so the character was softened and redeemed himself to a certain extent, although he still, from time to time, killed people and did awful things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Curtis and his writers thought, well, what are we going to do now? If we want to, well, Jonathan Frid is getting hundreds and hundreds of fan letters all the time, and we want to keep him on the show. But how do we perpetuate a vampire? And so Curtis and the writers decided, well, let's go back in time and show Barnabas as a human before he became a vampire, and that would certainly humanize him, literally.
Oh
And
yeah,
that was
the story arcs went from what, 1795 all the
Mhm.
way to 1995. So
Yes, right.
yeah,
And
I,
even a couple of very brief um, flashbacks to the 1600s, just an episode or two. But yeah, so just as Dark Shadows itself was groundbreaking in that it was the first daytime serial to use ghosts and the supernatural. No other daytime show had ever gone back in time and certainly used the same actors playing different roles, but that was Curtis's idea of the repertory company. These great actors, many of them are stage actors and they can play anything. And so we'll use them over and over as different characters. And the writers realized that we fans would get it. We wouldn't be confused when we saw Louis Edmonds become Joshua Collins or Joan Bennett become Naomi Collins. We would get it because, for many of us who loved Dark Shadows, we also loved comic books and science fiction, and we were acquainted with time travel and parallel universes and doppelgangers and all of that already. And so it was just like catnip for us kids and teenagers,
Oh, it had everything.
That's why we love it today.
Yeah, it had everything. Time travel. It had witches, ghosts, all kinds of things. Then you get to the atmosphere of the movie itself. Like you had the charm of the sets, and you even had wobbly sets, like where you would see something move, like a wall move. It was just, it added to the charm. If you go back and watch these, man, it's something I just love. It's part of my heart. I love it so much.
Yeah, and you get to look at Laura Parker.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it was like watching a stage play every day because it was not live like The Edge of Night and some of the other soap operas, but it was live on tape, meaning don't stop, don't flub up the tape, because it costs money to edit the videotape. And back then you had to literally take a razor blade and cut videotape and pay to go into a studio and have an editor do that. So it was only if something catastrophic happened to the set or a person that they in the early years of the show that they ever stopped the tape. So that's why you saw flubs and bloopers and things falling down and people tripping or the set shaking or falling down. But we viewers were so into it, it didn't even usually occur to us as being funny. And certainly back then we weren't looking at Dark Shadows as being campy. Yeah. Now you can look at it and find unintentional humor. Yeah. But what made the show such a success is that the actors were playing it straight. They were not trying to spoof the material like a Carol Burnett skit or something. They played it in a believable, convincing way, and so that's what made us believe it as we watched them, because they were deadly earnest and playing it completely straight, even though some of the actors might have gone in for histrionics and theatrics some of the time, but it was a serious, dramatic program, and that's why so many of the fans dislike the Tim Burton Johnny Depp film.
I was just going to bring that up. I'm like, do you even want to talk about that?
Well, the parts of it that are dramatic, romantic, and scary are very good, especially the first 8 or 9 minutes of the film. But then everything else is far too silly. None of that would have happened on what we fans would say the real Dark Shadows. It was far too silly. And it's a shame, because the first draft of the script was completely serious. But by the time Burton got around to making the movie, there had been quite a few other completely serious vampire stories out there, like True Blood, The Vampire Diaries, Twilight. And so Burton and his writer decided, wrongly, I think, well, we shouldn't just do another serious show. Let's make it funny. And so, it just tonally was not right for Dark Shadows, because even though you can laugh at some of the Dark Shadows episodes,
Right.
just like you can laugh at Batman, you can take it completely seriously and not laugh. It wouldn't even occur to you to laugh because you're right there and in the crisis that Barnabas and Julia and the others are facing. So yeah, the 2012 movie, I think, was a missed opportunity in many ways. Although, like I said, there are a lot of good things about it, such as it should have won the Oscar for art direction because Collinwood and especially the town of Collinsport were amazing. And then, like I say, somebody is talking about Sleepy Hollow. If Dark Shadows had been as serious as Burton's 1999 film Sleepy Hollow, that would have been the way to go.
Oh yeah.
But
Love that movie.
and then of course Christopher Lee is in it, so if Christopher Lee is in a movie, it's not all bad. It's great that Christopher Lee now exists in a Dark Shadows universe. And we fans knew all about the multiverse decades before it has become common knowledge to all moviegoers because of the Marvel movies and Everything Everywhere All at Once and so many of the time travel type things that we see today. So we accept that House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows exist in a different reality than our TV show, and the 1991 Dark Shadows is a different reality because everything happens right then in 1991. That's when Barnabas is released from the chain coffin, and the great paperback novels by my friend Dan Ross are another universe, and the Gold Key comic books and the more recent comic books and the Big Finish audio dramas and all of this. We can accept all of it as a Dark Shadows because we love the characters and we enjoy seeing different interpretations, like every interpretation of a Shakespeare play is different, and that's what makes it interesting. But underlying is the plot as well as the characters.
One of the, I think, successes of Dark Shadows is because that everyone was friends behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You have so many shows today where it's like everyone just goes into their trailer and that's it. But these people were not only friends during the shooting, but I love how they would always do fan conventions as well afterwards.
Yes. There were great friendships back then. Laura Parker and Catherine Lee Scott were very close. And but you're right. When the Dark Shadows festivals, there were shadow cons and conventions featuring the stars in the late 70s before the Dark Shadows festivals began in 83. But when those conventions began and the actors started seeing each other again, they became friends all over again, or even became friends for the first time because this actor might not have been on the show when this one was on the show, but now they know each other from the conventions and they are friends that way, and are friends with the fans. Of course, the stars are very friendly and accessible. But yes, you're right. Catherine Lee Scott in her many writings has commented that it was a happy set for the most part. There were a few little clashes, but for the most part, it was a very amicable, friendly, happy, collaborative set. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so successful, because these people liked each other and knew how to work together well to put out this product, and we were reaping the benefits of it.
When you were here last year, I love the story that you told of Jonathan Freed, where he got a fan letter, but he thought when he was given it, it was his pink slip.
He told that story several times at the convention. He said that Dan Curtis one day came to the set and gave him a few letters, and so Jonathan thought to himself, "Oh no, this must be my pink slip." But no, they were fan letters. And then the next day he got a dozen more, and then he started getting 50, and then 100, and then hundreds, and then thousands. So much so that he enlisted some of the local New York area fans to help him answer the fan mail. You've heard about how New York area kids ganged around the studio door of the Dark Shadows studio. And there are a lot of people's home movies of Laura Parker or David Selby walking out of the studio and smiling or signing an autograph. So, some of those New York area fans, Frid and the show, asked to come and help them put together. Help them answer the fan mail. Jonathan, I think, referred to them as fan mail parties or something. And at one of
good
those
old days.
events, they did show a film reel of the very first episode, and so many of those fans and all of us may not have seen the first episode. I did not start watching Dark Shadows until September of 1967. When I happened upon it when I was homesick from school. So I didn't see those 1966 pre-Barnabas episodes, as we call them, until they came out on VHS. And now they're on DVD. And Dark Shadows, I think, has its own Pluto channel, and I think it may be on Tubi as well. So you can find it. And of course, it ran on the Sci-Fi channel from 1992 to 2003, about 2.5 times as long as the show was on ABC.
I tell you, I love the marketing of the DVDs in that big coffin.
Oh, I love
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Oh,
Yeah, first the shows came out on VHS, and then on some DVD sets that occasionally were slightly edited, and the fans did not like that. And so now they've come back on DVD a second time to completely uncut, completely as they were back then, even to some of the announcers' voiceovers on the closing credits. Tune in tonight for The Green Hornet, or watch The Newlywed Game, or watch Peyton Place, or something like that. And more and more of the Dan Curtis productions are going to start coming out on Blu-ray. As a matter of fact, 11 different Dan Curtis productions are going to be coming out on Blu-ray from a company later in the summer and fall and into 2026. The company has not announced it yet, or what the productions are, but there will be quite a few more Dan Curtis productions, TV movies, and late night wide world mystery episodes and things like that will be coming along if you don't already have it on VHS or DVD.
I would hope that they kind of restore some of it.
Yes.
I don't know. Although I do love the old look. I mean, they do need to touch up some of that stuff. So if it's coming out on Blu-ray, for sure.
that reminds me of a story you also told where there was a part of the Dark Shadows. Maybe it was one of the movies found, but the sound wasn't there and the actors had to go back in studio.
Yes. Yeah. For Night of Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows.
We fans wish more than anything that we could see the complete, almost 2.5-hour version of Night of Dark Shadows, which was drastically cut down, to be only about 93.5 minutes, I believe.
The Smiling Cobra.
The Smiling Cobra, James Aubrey,
Yes.
who was the head at MGM at the time, ordered Dan Curtis to cut it and gave him just 24 hours to do it. So Curtis had to sit all night with an MGM editor and decide, well, let's take this out. Let's put these two dream sequences together. Let's take this out. And Hollywood lore, I don't know whether it's true, but it very possibly is, says that at one point Curtis came over the table at James Aubrey. He was so angry with him. Rightfully so, because
I would be too.
If we could see the entire Night of Dark Shadows, and we do have the script available to us, it would be a minor masterpiece of 70s horror. But in 1999, Darren Gross, who is another expert on the movies and film in general, found the missing footage in a salt mine in Kansas City. That's where MGM was keeping all of its movies, because it's cool and dry down there. But there was no sound to a lot of it. So, and this was quite a few years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
The living actors, David Selby, Kate Jackson, John Carlin, Nancy Barrett, went into a studio and re-recorded their lines. And at a Dark Shadows festival, David Selby said to me, "That's the hardest I've ever worked in my life." He said, because we had the script, but we saw obviously that we were not following the script verbatim, that we were sort of paraphrasing and putting it into our own words.
Yeah.
So we were having to try to match that. And Selby said that we brought in a lip reading expert to tell us exactly what we had said. So yeah, we were hoping, when the 2012 Tim Burton movie came out and the two Dark Shadows movies came out on Blu-ray, that we would get the re-edited, restored, complete version, but we didn't. It was the same 94-minute version. But the complete version does exist now, with music that has been added, Robert Cobert's music, and with the voices. So it's a shame that we can't see that movie, because it is out there. It does exist, but there is some encouraging news that it may eventually come out. It may surface after all, but it still may be a few years in the future, if ever. But it's definitely possible that we may see the entire thing again. And now there were some scenes cut out of House of Dark Shadows, but none of that footage exists apparently. So we can never find any more of that. But if you read the script or read Dan Roth's novelization of House of Dark Shadows, you can see some of those missing scenes. But at least House of Dark Shadows makes sense 95% of the time, whereas Night of Dark Shadows suffers in some scenes because there are gaps. We don't know why somebody said a certain line, or why this has been moved, or why they're doing this or that, because the explanations in other scenes are missing.
Well, maybe something to look forward to in the future. More Dark Shadows, then, hopefully, huh?
Yeah,
Dave,
next year is the 60th anniversary of Dark Shadows, 1966. So there are going to be a couple of new books coming out, and they haven't been announced yet, but they will be. I'm sure maybe this fall, or certainly winter or spring.
Are there many documentaries on Dark Shadows?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Two great ones. There's a Jonathan Frid documentary that gives us a lot of history and film clips of his acting career and his life. And then there's a wonderful Dan Curtis documentary called Master of Dark Shadows. Its only flaw is that it's not long enough. You could make a 3 or 4 hour documentary and cover all 4 dozen of Dan Curtis productions, as I do in my 3 books. But what is there in the documentary is just top notch, and a lot of it is things we didn't know before in both cases, about Jonathan Frid and about Dan Curtis. And so yeah, they are streaming, I believe, or I think you can buy them on Amazon or something like that. But then they are on DVD and Blu-ray too. And I can't think of the exact title of the Jonathan Frid documentary at this moment. It was done by Mary O'Leary, a 6-time Emmy Award winner who produced Guiding Light, The Young and the Restless, and other daytime dramas, and who was a close friend and business partner of Jonathan Frid. She helped him organize his one-man shows of dramatic readings in the 80s and 90s. And so she put this together with help and input from many of the Dark Shadow stars and writers and friends of Jonathan Frid. Same with the Dan Curtis documentary too. So yeah, seek those 2 out if you haven't seen them, because they are both very, very good, but they both make you want more. They want you to, they make you want to see even more clips and learn more. That's why I ended up writing 3 books, not just the first one, because I still had much more to say about Dan Curtis and was constantly learning more and more about him as I did research, and had many more rare pictures that didn't make it into the first book. And I wanted the fans to see all of those good pictures. So that's why I wrote House of Dan Curtis and Knights of Dan Curtis.
Mm.
House, both of them are plays on the names of the movies, but House of Dan Curtis means the productions from the production House of Dan Curtis. But then a friend of mine said, well, if you've written House of Dan Curtis, you're going to have to write Knight of Dan Curtis. And so I wrote Knights, plural, of Dan Curtis, meaning all of the wonderful nights that we sat in front of the TV watching his ABC movies of the week and watching The Winds of War and his Western and his love stories.
Very nice, very nice. Well, we've been talking an hour and a half, Jeff. I cannot believe it's flown by so quickly. Right, Dave?
Look at these notes.
You still got more notes?
My notes.
Oh yeah, we could go on again. I'd like to come back at some point and we'll talk again.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, keep those notes, Dave.
And thank you. I've been looking at all of these comments from your fans, and some of them have said very, very kind, sweet things. So I thank you very much for saying all of the things you've said about Dan Curtis and Dark Shadows and my writing and the two of you and the great job that you all are doing with the Late Late Horror Show. So
thank you.
You all have a great group of fan friends here.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. What really quick? Does Jeff Thompson have a guilty pleasure when it comes to horror movies? Maybe just one, whatever. We don't want to keep you too much longer, but
well, there's just so many. I love I love Psycho. I love House of Dark Shadows, Night, Burnt Offerings. I love The Incredible Shrinking Man, one of the best movies ever made.
Okay.
The Changeling, The Haunting, The Reincarnation of Peter Proud, The Other. There's
how about this? If you had to take one movie on a desert island, what would you take?
Well, that would be Chinatown, a movie that I have seen probably 200 times.
There you go.
Because I showed it to my students at Tennessee State University. I showed that in Somewhere in Time over and over and over. And my students always told me we never knew old movies were so good.
Oh my!
Because I showed great old movies like Chinatown, Bonnie and Clyde, Somewhere in Time, A Raisin in the Sun, The Outsiders. Great movies that don't follow the typical Hollywood formula today of having happy endings. Think of the endings of Chinatown, Somewhere in Time, The Outsiders, Bonnie and Clyde. And so the students were shocked that major characters, things happened to them, but they always wrote wonderful, heartfelt, emotional essays about the films, especially Somewhere in Time, another one of the best movies ever. And if you haven't seen it, you must see Somewhere in Time. It is a life-changing movie. But Chinatown, I think, is a great film because it's so textured and layered, and you see something or hear something different every time you watch it. And that's true with all great movies. There are some movies that are just essentially perfect. Casablanca, Psycho, North by Northwest, certainly, Chinatown, Tootsie, Matinee. There are some movies that are just, there's no way they could be any better because they are just perfectly written, directed, and acted. And when you run across one of those, it because you're just basking in it and you're enjoying every moment of the movie because you realize, well, this is something special. This is going to last.
I'm going to add The Godfather to that list.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I love The Godfather Part 2 in some ways even more. But it's the same thing, like great sequels like The Empire Strikes Back and Gremlins 2 and The Godfather and Psycho 2. you wouldn't have those movies unless you had the predecessor,
Right.
and you what makes those sequels so great is the history and the background that you bring to it. Even The Night Strangler, you've been with these people before, you've seen them, you know them, and now we're going to see something else that happens to them.
Yes. Well, you know what? We can't keep you any longer. I've got to stream overnight. Go on, Dave.
I was
What?
going to say we're already 5 minutes over.
Dave needs coffee and food.
Mhm.
And it's also, how hot is it there, Dave? Pretty hot.
90.
9. Okay. Well, anyways, listen, Jeff, it was great to have you on here again. I would tell everybody to definitely look. You know what? I think I only found one book on Amazon, though. Are all 3 up there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I've looked at all 3 lately. You can find
Okay.
them all in the revised second editions. Make sure you buy the new second edition because they are updated, improved, and have more information than I knew when I wrote the original editions. So by all
Okay.
means, look for the second editions. But yes, you can find all 3 of them just on Amazon. Just type in House of Dan Curtis. You might see the first edition, but buy the second, and type in Knights of Dan Curtis, or type in my name, Jeff Thompson, Television Horrors of Dan Curtis, or whatever.
Sweet. Yeah, no, I've got a link in the description, but I think it only leads me to one book, so I'm going to have to
Well, yeah, each
look
book
again.
has a different link.
Right, right. But
and
usually
and
there's an author
and,
page.
and sometimes on my Facebook page I put all 3 of the links up. If
Well, maybe I'll just add that too then, huh?
if I'm commenting on a Dan Curtis production or something, then
Okay.
under my post in the little thread, I will put up the 3 different posts.
Nice, nice. Okay, okay. Well, look for it. Do you take Facebook requests? I mean, if somebody wants to friend you or whatever, or do you
Oh
got a
yeah, of
page?
course. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
well, find them on Facebook too. There you go. You'll find everything.
Mhm.
Keep track of
Yeah.
Dr. Jeff Thompson.
On Facebook, I'm listed as Jeff Thompson, Tennessee State University.
Okay, okay. Dave, any last words
Well,
before?
now I'm just thinking about Faye Dunaway and Bonnie and Clyde.
Well,
But
Oh
listen,
yes.
that's
I-
yeah,
I can't thank Jeff enough for joining us the second time. I really appreciate you
yeah.
spending the time with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I loved it.
For sure. Thank you. Always exciting, always good stuff. How can you not have good stuff to talk about? Psycho, Kolchak, I mean, Dark Shadows. Come on.
Mhm. And we still didn't get to Somewhere in Time.
And others.
Yes.
But anyways, let's until next week, me and Dave we'll see you next Sunday. For what, Dave?
Columbo.
Columbo. I can't wait to watch Columbo. Anyways, thanks again, and peace and love to each and every one of you.